Good morning to you and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely Friday morning. Great to see you and thank you for joining us this morning. Quick plug if I may, this weekend, apart from all our services as normal, on Sunday evening instead of even so, we are carol singing on the green. If you'd like to come and join us, wrap up warm, bring some mince pies, bring some mulled wine, bring your best thermal long johns in church or out of church at the moment, and come and join us. We'd love to see you carol singing on the green on Sunday night at 5:30. You provide the light, we'll produce the carol sheets, and have a wonderful time. Anyway, we are in the letter of Paul to Titus. And as you know, or you might remember from yesterday, Titus was a guy who's there for a tough assignment, and Paul has left him a tough assignment. He left him behind in Crete. And as you can see, I don't think the letter of Paul to Titus was sponsored by the Cretan Tourist Board. You'll see why in a minute. Anyway, without further ado, Titus chapter 1, starting to read at verse 5. Paul writes to Titus, I left you behind in Crete for this reason, so you may put in order what remains to be done, and should appoint elders in every town, as I directed you. Someone who's blameless, married only once, whose children are believers, not accused of debauchery, not rebellious. For a bishop, as God's steward, must be blameless. He must not be arrogant, or quick-tempered, or addicted to wine, or violent, or greedy for gain. But he must be hospitable, a lover of goodness, prudent, upright, devout, and self-controlled. He must have a firm grasp of the word, that his trust is worthy in accordance with the teaching, so he may be able both to preach with sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict it. There are also many rebellious people, idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision. They must be silenced, since they are upsetting whole families by teaching for sordid gain what's not right to teach. It was one of them by a very own prophet who said, Cretans are always liars, vicious brutes, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. For this reason, rebuke them sharply, so they may become sound in the faith, not paying attention to Jewish myths or to commandments of those who reject the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but to the corrupt and unbelieving, nothing is pure. Their very minds and consciences are corrupted. They profess to know God, but they deny him by their actions. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for any good work. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, as a teenager, I went on a holiday to Crete twice, when I was 16 and when I was 17. And I have to say, I found the people there absolutely delightful. So, and I was bitten by a dog, actually, in Crete, and I was terrified I might have rabies or something. But some very nice Cretan person who didn't speak English, and we didn't speak any Greek, very kindly drove us to the hospital, and as you can see, 40 years on, I'm alive and safe. So my experience of people in Crete was actually that they're absolutely delightful. But what becomes clear in the book of Titus here this morning is that at the time, the people of Crete had, shall we say, something of a reputation. They were known as kind of being bad people, and so on. And what's more, in Crete as well, there were also some sort of Jewish Christians who were kind of leading people astray as well. And so generally speaking, the situation in Crete, from a Christian point of view, was not good. And it kind of reads a bit strangely to us, but we have to remember it was written 2,000 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. But I think what's interesting here, really, is that however bad the reputation of the Cretans may have been at the time, let's put it like that, Paul has not written them off. What's interesting is that he could have said to Titus, keep away from that miserable lot, don't go anywhere near that wall, we're pulling out of there, you've got no chance there, man, says grotty types. But he doesn't. He actually leaves Titus in Crete with a tough mission to go and get it sorted out. So other people may give up on these naughty, wicked Cretans, as it was at the time, but Paul clearly hasn't. And I think there's something wonderful here, actually, that I know it reads a bit odd to us, but that Paul hasn't given up on them, that nobody is beyond redemption, that Paul still thinks it's worth putting one of his chief lieutenants in there to go and get it sorted out. So nobody is beyond the love of God, and everybody, no one should ever be written off. I've known in the past all sorts of people. I mean, I think of one or two in particular who, the last person in that particular place I'd expected to become a Christian did, and I've seen them get confirmed and all sorts of things. God, you do work in mysterious ways, they say, and God certainly does. And nobody and nothing and nobody is beyond the reach of the love of God. And it's interesting here that however oddly this description of Cretans may be, what is interesting is that Paul hasn't given up on them, like I say, and he puts one of his chief lieutenants, Titus, in there to try and preach the gospel there and keep the Christian church going there. So we can learn from this, as I say, it reads a bit oddly, that nobody is beyond the reach of the love of God. Secondly, there's something also here about the importance of something boring called administration. We vicars, we all complain about the amount of time we spend in front of the computer and the amount of time we spend doing paperwork and organising things and sorting things out and all this type of stuff. And, we want to get out and preach the word. But actually, we do, and that's quite right, because the gospel should be the fire in our hearts. But it is worth saying that administration and the way things are run is actually very, very important. And wherever Paul went, he didn't just preach the word and go. He established churches. He established a church organisation. And what's clear is that there's this church has been organised. The gospel has been preached in Crete. And what Paul wants Titus to do is do what clearly hadn't been done in the past, which is to set up elders in every town, people of high moral calibre. If I have to say, frighteningly high moral calibre. I think most of us would fail this, to be honest with you. Frighteningly high moral calibre. People who are solid, people who are faithful, people who are committed to the gospel, people who are good, decent individuals to kind of keep an eye on the place. So Paul recognises the importance of administration. That actually, it's important that we don't just preach the word, but actually we organise organisations as well. There was a great preacher 200 or 300 years ago called John Wesley who formed the Methodist movement. And John Wesley is best. His brother Charles was the one that wrote the hymns, Hark the Herald and Over a Thousand Tongues and things. But John was the preacher, and he was the beginner of Methodism. But John Wesley is best known for his preaching. That he went round towns preaching, when he preached a frightening number of sermons and so on, and so on. But what people forget is he didn't just preach the word very powerfully, but he also had a thing called the class movement or the class system, which was a way of organising where people get together in small groups and study the word together. And so he wasn't just a great preacher, he was also a great administrator as well. And the gift of administration is really, really important too. And Paul is saying to Titus, don't just preach the word, but also set up elders in every town to kind of make sure that the word continues. So administration, 3 cheers for administration, because the word hasn't just got to be preached, but actually we need organisations to keep the word going and to set up churches so they run well, they can run efficiently, and the word can be preached in the best possible way. So 2 things so far this morning. Nobody, even Cretans 2,000 years ago, Cretans is beyond the love of God, and also administration is really important too. But the problem they had in Crete was not just that they were known as brutes and gluttons and that sort of stuff. There were also some people there who were kind of, there was a heresy creeping in as well. At the time, lots of issues around Judaism at the time were to do with keeping away from things that were unclean. And you couldn't eat this and you couldn't touch that and all this type of stuff. And a heresy came in called Gnosticism, which kind of took it worse. Gnosticism basically says is the spirit is good and the flesh is bad. So life is not to be enjoyed, life is to be endured. And and life was not for pleasure. Life was not to be enjoyed, life was to be endured. The really important thing is kind of what's beyond that. And they kind of took it too far. And so life became a question of you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't touch this because that's unclean and you can't touch that and that's bad and so on and so on and so on. And Paul says an interesting thing. He says here, to the pure, all things are pure. And Jesus said something similar, where it's not what goes into a person that offends them, but what comes out, see. And I think what he means to say is Paul says here, to the pure, all things are pure. And of course, to the impure, all things are impure. And that actually life does not have to be avoided, because actually if you go life with a godly attitude, you can think of everything, think the good side of everything. To the impure, everything is to... People look at things with a dirty mind and a dirty thought and a twisted mind. They twist even good things around and make them bad. But to a pure person, actually, everything can be seen. It can be turned round. And I think I said to you before, so often I wish I could wake up in the morning and say, good morning, Lord. Often I wake up and I think, good Lord, morning. Actually, it all depends on the way you look at it. You can thank God for what you've got, or you can moan for what you haven't got. To the pure, all things are pure, and to the impure, they aren't. And actually, if you look at things with God's eyes, everything can be thought of as good. And so life should not be a question of you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't eat this and you can't eat that. Actually, to the pure, if you receive anything with thanks, to the pure, all things are pure. Something for you to reflect on today. So, 3 things from this morning's reading briefly, if I may. Firstly, as I said, nobody is beyond the reach of the love of God, even first century Cretans. Secondly, administration in church life is important. It's important things that places are, and churches are well run. Not just preaching the word, but organising it as well. And thirdly, actually, to the pure, all things are pure. And let's ask God today to give us pure eyes, to help us to look through life with his lenses, to see the good in all things, to see things in his way, to receive everything with thanks, and to give everything to the glory of God. And in that way, to the pure, all things are pure, including you and me. Have a lovely weekend. Do please share these messages with your friends. And I'd love to see you this weekend. If you're free, you want to come and have a sing with us on Sunday night at 5:30, we'd love to see you. God bless you and have a lovely